The HTML5 Canvas API provides a rich set of functions and properties we can use to draw lines and paths, and that's going to be the focus of this section. Now here's a quick survey of the key functions we'll focus on. So we can begin paths. We looked at that in a previous section in this module as I showed how to use it with Arc2. We can draw Bezier curves, we can draw quadratic curves, and you'll see there's a little bit of difference between those in how you specify the parameters and define those. We can close paths a couple different ways. We can either call close path or we can stroke a particular path that we might have begun. And then we can move to a particular area on the canvas, specifying the x and y coordinates, and then draw a line to another area on that canvas. So that's the API functions we're going to look at. So here's a quick run through of some of the key line functions that you might use as you work with the canvas. So begin path we've seen before. It simply tells the canvas we're about to start connecting some dots. Close path is a way we can close that path explicitly if you'd like. Line to and move to generally go together. Move to is where you'll specify the x and y coordinate of where to position the brush if you imagine yourself with your hand holding a brush and going up to the canvas. And 0, 0, of course, would be the upper left-hand corner, but we might want to move over, say, 100 on the x and 100 on the y, and that would be where we're going to start drawing from. Then we might want to draw a line to maybe 200 on the x and 100 on the y, and that would draw a straight line across. So that's the kind of functionality that we're going to be adding here. Now, as you draw lines, there's different properties that you can use to control whether the connecting lines are rounded, how they're capped, how the angle of those look. That's called the miter limit, and line width, and those types of things. So we'll look at a few of those coming up in some of the demos. Now here's an example of using several of these functions together to ultimately render a triangle. And so you can see we start off as normal by finding the canvas and then getting the 2D context. From there we're going to set our stroke style, you can see, to red and make the line width a little bit thicker. We're going to set it to 3 in this case. Then we're going to go in and say, all right, canvas, we're going to begin a path. So this will start the dot-to-dot tracking, if you will. From there, we're going to move our paintbrush, our context, over 100 and down 400 on the canvas. And then we're going to draw a line to the position that you see down here. So we're going to go down to x50, over to the left, and down 500. From that position, we're going to draw over to 150, 500. And then we're going to draw another line to connect it up, which will be 100, 400, which you can see matches where we started in the first place. Now to actually fill that in, we're going to call stroke, and that effectively closes our path. And then we can go in and set the fill style to yellow and go ahead and fill it as well if we'd like. And that's how simple it is to draw lines. Now the challenging part, of course, is you need to know the x and y coordinates of all these different lines, but it actually fills those in and kind of connects the dots, if you will. Now in addition to doing that, we can also use some of the more curve-oriented type of functions, and we have things like begin path, close path again, and we can stroke a particular shape. But we can also do Bezier curves, which gives us a couple of control points we have to define. So a control x and y point, another x and y control point, and then a final point. So you can see that really we have 3 sets of points that are defined in this case for a Bezier curve. And we can close that path as usual. We can move to start where that path, where that kind of paintbrush starts painting at. And then a more simplified version of the Bezier curve is the quadratic curve, which just has 1 control point and 1 ending point. And then we can always stroke, or we can even fill those paths if we'd like. Now the same type of things apply. We can provide line caps and joins and widths and those types of things as we're drawing these different shapes onto the canvas. So here's an example of the quadratic curve, and it's a little bit simpler because you define a move to point, and you're going to give it 1 control point down here, and then you'll give it the final point, the x and y coordinate, and it will automatically round between these points. So if you imagine drawing this kind of triangle shape that you see right here, it'll basically kind of hug the line, but then draw this curve as appropriate based on how far away this is. So if this line over here was way over here, then obviously the curve would kind of come out this way. So it's a way to draw some different types of shapes and have a lot of control over it. Now if you really need control over it, you could do a Bezier curve. Now these are a little more involved because we have different control points. So we'll move to 50, 50. We'll then draw a control point at 50, 400. and we'll have another one at 400, 400, and then we'll end up here at 450. And that would represent our different control points, these two down here. And then this one up here represents our x and our y coordinate. So let's take a look at some demonstrations of drawing simple lines and drawing some different curves using the HTML5 canvas.